MES isn't a recording studio in the traditional sense. So a lot of people think of a studio, they think of all those photographs of, Pink Floyd from the 60s and 70s working in the studio. MES isn't like that. So MES is a not-for-profit organisation. We're actually a registered charity. We have DGR status. And we are a publicly accessible collection of electronic musical instruments.
The way we kind of see MES as a structure is around these four kind of tentpole aspects of what we do. So there's the studio here itself, which is not really like a recording studio, but is much more like an artist's studio. It's actually much more like a workshop. And the studio is where people come and get access to all the instruments. We have our school, which is like the education aspect of what we want to do. So it's all about affordable, short courses that are really just about empowering artists. They're not about certification, they're not about qualification. They really are about teaching artists new techniques and having artists share and interact across a bunch of ideas. Then we also have our shows, which is our ability to give a platform to people who are using MES, who are creating work at MES, to take their creations and put them out into the world in various different forms. And then lastly, we have another aspect which we call schematic, which is sort of really focused on the instruments themselves, the engineering around the instruments, but it also encapsulates a lot about the history of the instruments.
The collection is made up of other people's collections, so we have very generous benefactors who've given us access to these instruments. We have instruments ranging from synthesizers built in Melbourne, like the ones behind me in the mid-70s, incredibly rare and very hard to access anywhere else in the world. We have classic synthesizers like the Moog System 55, which is probably one of the most iconic synthesizers in the world. We have machines ranging all the way from, I guess, the antique to the current modular that people are using to create music today. And the idea is that anybody can come here and use this incredible resource and this collection of instruments. It's a multi-user space, so people come here and they work together, they often collaborate.
I think a lot of people don't realise what a fundamental role Australia has played in the development of electronic sound and music. The Fairlight CMI, which not only introduced sampling as a technique, which is now the most common electronic music technique that's used out there, but also the idea of an electronic music workstation. That was an Australian invention. And I think the idea of communicating this idea to people allows them to take a lot of pride in the developments that have happened here, but also to see Australia as a unique place in global culture when it comes to electronic sound and music making.
What's incredible about what we have here is that each of these instruments, while being similar, has its own aesthetic, it has its own design aesthetic, it has its own philosophy of music, it has its own philosophy of sound creation built into the actual hardware. And what I found anyway, moving away from the computer and back into an analog domain for making electronic music, is that it brings you back to your ears, it brings you back into focusing on what you're doing sonically, not focusing on what you're doing technically. And if you're here creating your sounds from scratch, you're not using any presets, no drop-down menus, you are here with a blank canvas and you have to connect each oscillator to each filter and each filter to each amplifier and the envelopes to the amplifier. If you're here making those connections and doing those things, firstly, you're learning about the physics of sound, you're learning about the fundamentals of how sound works and how music works, and you are also, through the individuality of your ears, your biology, you are creating a sound that is fundamentally yours. And that kind of creativity and that kind of creative process is exactly what we're trying to foster here at MES.
I think one of the really amazing things about making electronic sound today is that the boundaries between music, noise and sound don't really exist anymore. So any sound that you can go and record in the world, any sound that you can imagine to make, any sound that might be suggested by a synthesizer or some other electronic music instrument can be put together and create these amazing sound worlds, music compositions, soundscapes that people can share and enjoy and listen to and do all the things that they would do with any kind of work of art, really. I mean, in many ways, for someone creating sound and music, we live in a kind of amazing time where the boundaries of the past really no longer exist. And in many ways, we see MES as being a place where people who are interested in this world of interaction between all forms of sonic experience can come down, work, learn, and share together.
MES is for everybody. So MES is an organisation that is for the community. It's a resource for the community. And we encourage anybody to walk in off the street and engage with MES. You don't have to be a trained musician, you don't have to be an accomplished artist, you don't have to be anything. You just have to come in with a sense of curiosity and the desire to explore.